In the climate-controlled archives of the San Francisco Historical Society, photograph conservator Dr. Sarah Chen made a discovery that would uncover one of the most heartbreaking untold stories of the 1906 earthquake and fire. The black and white portrait showed a young boy, perhaps 8 years old, standing with remarkable composure beside a makeshift wooden fence. His clothes, while clean and carefully arranged, showed signs of hasty mending, patches sewn with different thread, a collar that didn't quite match the shirt's fabric. The photograph had been donated by the estate of Margaret Holloway, whose great-grandfather Thomas had been a photographer documenting the aftermath of San Francisco's greatest disaster. Among hundreds of images showing the city's destruction and rebuilding efforts, this particular portrait seemed to capture something different, a moment of dignity amid devastation. Dr. Chen had been cataloging the post-earthquake collection for months, each image telling a story of loss, survival, and resilience. The boy's portrait was labeled simply "Unknown Child Post-Fire Period, 1906, in Thomas Holloway's careful handwriting. What struck Dr. Chen immediately was the child's expression, not the typical forced smile of formal portraits, but a profound sadness mixed with an almost adult-like determination. As she prepared to digitize the photograph for preservation, Dr. Chen noticed the exceptional clarity of the image. Despite being taken during a period when photographic supplies were scarce and damaged equipment was common, this portrait showed remarkable detail. The boy's gaze was direct and unwavering, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he was seeing more than just the camera lens. When Dr. Chen increased the digital magnification to examine the photograph's condition, she discovered something that made her breath catch in her throat. Reflected in the boy's pupils, clearly visible when magnified, was an image that revealed the true story behind this seemingly simple portrait. The reflection showed the scarred and bandaged face of someone standing behind the photographer burn marks, extending from the left temple down to the jawline, the kind of devastating injuries that were tragically common among fire survivors. Dr. Chen immediately called her colleague, Dr. Michael Torres, a specialist in historical photography and disaster documentation. When he arrived 30 minutes later and examined the reflection under high magnification, his expression grew somber. "This changes everything we thought we knew about this photograph," Dr. Torres said quietly. "Look at the pattern of scarring in the reflection. These are severe burn injuries, the kind that would have required months of healing. But according to our dating, this photo was taken only weeks after the fire." The reflection was heartbreakingly clear. The person behind the camera bore the unmistakable marks of someone who had been caught in the flames that consumed most of San Francisco between April 1821, 1906. The scarring pattern suggested someone who had shielded their face while escaping through burning debris, sustaining injuries that would have been life-threatening without immediate medical care. Dr. Torres photographed the detail with specialized macro equipment, documenting what they had discovered. The boy's eyes had captured not just a reflection, but a testament to survival against impossible odds. The question that haunted both researchers was, who was this scarred person, and what was their relationship to the child? "We're not just looking at a portrait anymore," Dr. Chen observed. "We're looking at a family's story of survival, and the child's eyes have preserved evidence that might otherwise have been lost to history." Understanding the significance of their discovery, Dr. Chen and Dr. Torres contacted Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a specialist in disaster documentation and family photography from UC Berkeley, and Dr. James Patterson, a historian who had spent decades researching personal accounts of the 1906 earthquake and fire. Within days, a team of experts had assembled to investigate the story behind the photograph. Dr. Morrison brought extensive knowledge of how families documented their lives during and after major disasters. Photography was expensive and difficult in 1906, especially after the earthquake when most studios were destroyed, she explained. For someone to commission a formal portrait so soon after the fire suggests this image held special significance for the family. The team began by examining the photograph's technical aspects. The clarity and composition indicated it had been taken by a skilled photographer using quality equipment, remarkable considering that most of San Francisco's photography studios had been destroyed in the disaster. Thomas Holloway's journal, preserved by his descendants, provided the first crucial clue. His entry from June 15, 1906, read, "Photographed a young boy today whose family had recently escaped the fire. The child insisted his father be present during the session, though the man was reluctant to be seen due to his injuries. The boy's courage in the face of such tragedy was remarkable. He stood proud despite everything his family had endured." Dr. Patterson examined the historical context surrounding the photograph's date. June 1906 was a critical period in San Francisco's recovery, he explained. Families were living in refugee camps, dealing with trauma, and trying to rebuild their lives. Medical care for burn victims was primitive by today's standards. Many survivors carried permanent scars, both physical and emotional. The team realized they were looking at more than just a family portrait. They were seeing documentation of survival, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds between family members during one of America's greatest urban disasters. The team's investigation into the photograph's origin led them deep into the records of San Francisco's post-earthquake relief efforts. Dr. Patterson accessed archives from the Red Cross, military relief units, and makeshift hospitals that had treated fire survivors in 1906. What they discovered painted a picture of a city struggling to care for thousands of injured and displaced residents. Medical records from the period, though incomplete, showed that burn injuries were among the most common and severe traumas treated in the aftermath of the fire. Dr. Helen Rodriguez, a medical historian specializing in early 20th century trauma care, joined the investigation to help interpret the type of injuries visible in the photograph's reflection. The scarring pattern suggests this person was injured while protecting someone else, Dr. Rodriguez concluded after examining the enhanced images. The burns are concentrated on the left side of the face and appear to be from intense heat and flame contact. The survival rate for injuries this severe was less than 50% in 1906. Thomas Holloway's business records, preserved by his family, provided another piece of the puzzle. A receipt dated June 15, 1906, showed payment for one formal portrait fire survivor family, with a note that the session had been donated free of charge in recognition of their courage. The team discovered that Holloway had established a practice of providing free portraits to families who had lost everything in the fire. His journal entries from this period showed a man deeply moved by the stories of survival he encountered. Each family carries scars both visible and hidden. My camera has become a witness to their strength, and I consider it my duty to preserve their dignity for posterity. Margaret Holloway's family provided access to additional materials from Thomas's estate, including a collection of letters from grateful families and a detailed map showing the locations where post-fire portraits had been taken. The boy's photograph had been taken at a temporary relief camp in Golden Gate Park, where thousands of displaced families lived in tents and makeshift shelters. The breakthrough in identifying the boy came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Eleanor Murphy, a 94-year-old resident of the Richmond district, saw the photograph featured in a San Francisco Chronicle article about the research team's discovery. She contacted the Historical Society with startling information. She believed the boy was her uncle, James McKenna. "I recognize those eyes," Mrs. Murphy said during her visit to examine the photograph. "My Uncle James had that same determined look, even as an adult. The family always said he had been photographed as a child after the fire, but we thought all copies of the portrait had been lost over the years." Mrs. Murphy brought a collection of family documents and later photographs that confirmed her identification. James McKenna appeared in family photos from the 1920s and 1930s, showing the same facial features and distinctive gaze captured in the 1906 portrait. More importantly, she brought family stories that explained the scarred figure reflected in his eyes. James's father, Patrick McKenna, had been severely burned while rescuing neighbors from a burning tenement building during the fire, Mrs. Murphy explained. He spent months recovering, and the family said he was self-conscious about his scars. But James insisted his father be present for every important family moment, including having his portrait taken. The family had lived in a tent city in Golden Gate Park for nearly 6 months after losing their home in the Mission District. Patrick McKenna, despite his injuries, had worked tirelessly to help other families in the camp, using his experience as a construction worker to help build temporary shelters and organize relief efforts. The photograph was taken just before they moved into temporary housing, Mrs. Murphy continued. James was so proud of his father's heroism that he wanted the portrait to capture. Thomas Holloway's journal provided additional insight into the family's situation when the portrait was taken. The boy spoke with pride about his father's heroism, though he seemed to understand the gravity of his father's injuries. There was a maturity in his demeanor that spoke to the hardships this family had endured. The team's research into the McKenna family's post-fire life revealed how the trauma and heroism of 1906 shaped the rest of their story. City directories and census records showed that the family had indeed moved into temporary housing in late 1906, eventually settling in the Richmond district as the city rebuilt. Patrick McKenna never fully recovered from his injuries. Employment records showed that his burn-damaged hands and limited mobility forced him to retire from construction work. However, he found new purpose as an organizer for disaster relief efforts, using his experience as a fire survivor to help other families navigate the complex process of receiving aid and rebuilding assistance. James McKenna, profoundly influenced by his father's heroism and sacrifice, dedicated his life to public service. School records showed he had been an exceptional student despite the family's difficult circumstances. He later became a firefighter with the San Francisco Fire Department, serving for over 30 years and rising to the rank of battalion chief. Mrs. Murphy shared family stories about how the 1906 portrait had remained James's most treasured possession throughout his life. He kept it on his desk at the fire station, she recalled. He would tell new recruits about his father's heroism and how one person's courage could save many lives. The photograph reminded him why he had chosen to become a firefighter. The reflection of Patrick's scarred face in James's eyes had captured more than just a physical image. It had preserved the moment when a young boy's admiration for his father's heroism was permanently documented. The portrait became a symbol of the unbreakable bond between father and son, forged in the crucible of one of America's greatest urban disasters. Dr. Patterson discovered that James had written a detailed account of his family's 1906 experiences for a fire department historical project in 1956, 50 years after the earthquake. In this account, James described the portrait session and his insistence that his father be present despite Patrick's reluctance to be photographed due to his scars. Further investigation into Thomas Holloway's post-earthquake work revealed that he had documented dozens of similar stories of heroism and survival. His collection of relief camp portraits, previously thought to be simple documentation of displaced families, actually represented one of the most comprehensive records of individual heroism during the 1906 disaster. Holloway's technique of capturing reflections in his subjects' eyes had been intentional, a way of including family members who were reluctant to be photographed due to injuries or trauma. His journal revealed this as a deliberate artistic and humanitarian choice. Many fathers and mothers bear scars from their heroic actions during the fire. When they refused to stand for portraits due to their changed appearance, I positioned them near the camera so their presence is captured in their children's eyes. The team discovered that Holloway had developed this technique specifically for documenting fire survivor families. Of the 43 relief camp portraits in his collection, 19 showed similar reflections, capturing scarred or injured family members who had been too self-conscious to appear directly in the photographs. Holloway understood that these families needed to preserve their complete story, Dr. Morrison observed. The reflections in the children's eyes became a way of honoring the sacrifices of parents who had risked everything to save others, even when those parents couldn't bear to have their injuries prominently displayed. Holloway's correspondence with relief organizations showed that he had provided over 200 free portraits to fire survivor families between May and October 1906. His letters describe the emotional impact of these sessions. Each portrait tells a story of loss transformed into strength. These families have faced the unthinkable and emerged with their love for one another intact. The photographer had died in 1923, but his obituary in the San Francisco Chronicle mentioned his dedicated service documenting the courage of our city's fire survivors. The McKenna portrait was apparently one of his most technically successful captures of this reflection technique, preserving the image with extraordinary clarity. The complete story of the McKenna family portrait emerged as the team compiled their research findings. The photograph had been taken on June 15, 1906, nearly 2 months after the earthquake and fire, as the family prepared to move from the Golden Gate Park refugee camp into temporary housing. 8-year-old James McKenna had requested the portrait session as a way of celebrating his father's recovery and the family's survival. Despite Patrick's reluctance to be photographed due to his prominent facial scars, James had insisted that his father be present during the session. Thomas Holloway had positioned Patrick behind his camera, where his reflection would be captured in his son's eyes, a technique that honored the father's heroism while respecting his sensitivity about his appearance. The portrait represented a pivotal moment in the family's recovery from trauma. James's proud stance and direct gaze reflected not shame about his father's injuries, but profound admiration for Patrick's courage during the fire. The boy's insistence on including his father in the portrait, even indirectly, demonstrated wisdom beyond his years and an understanding of what true heroism looked like. Mrs. Murphy provided the final piece of the story when she shared James's own written account of that day. "I wanted everyone to know that my father was a hero, not just someone who had been hurt in the fire. Mr. Holloway found a way to make sure Papa was in our family picture, even though Papa didn't want his scars to show. When I looked into that camera, I was thinking about how brave my father was, and I guess that's what people see when they look at the photograph." The team realized they had uncovered far more than an unusual photographic technique. They had discovered a powerful story about family bonds, heroism, and resilience that exemplified the spirit of San Francisco during its darkest and most challenging period. The reflection in James's eyes wasn't an impossible detail. It was a testament to a father's sacrifice and a son's unwavering love and admiration, preserved forever through the compassionate artistry of a photographer who understood the importance of documenting complete family stories. The discovery of the true story behind James McKenna's portrait sparked renewed interest in the personal narratives of 1906 earthquake and fire survivors. The San Francisco Fire Department, learning of James McKenna's career and family history, established a memorial display featuring the portrait and Patrick McKenna's story of heroism during the disaster. Mrs. Murphy worked with the Historical Society to donate the family's collection of documents and photographs, ensuring that the McKenna family's complete story would be preserved for future generations. The portrait now serves as the centerpiece of an exhibition about unsung heroes of the 1906 disaster, highlighting ordinary citizens who risked their lives to save others. The research team's work led to a broader project examining Thomas Holloway's complete collection of relief camp portraits. Each image containing similar eye reflections was analyzed, revealing dozens of previously unknown stories of heroism and sacrifice. These portraits collectively document a level of community courage and mutual aid that had been largely absent from official disaster records. Dr. Chen established a new protocol for examining historical photographs using digital enhancement techniques, leading to discoveries of hidden details in portraits worldwide. The McKenna case demonstrated how modern technology could reveal stories that had been literally invisible for over a century. James McKenna's career with the San Francisco Fire Department took on new significance when viewed through the lens of his childhood experience. Department records showed that he had recommended numerous safety improvements and training protocols based on lessons learned from the 1906 fire. His understanding of how disasters affected families informed his approach to emergency response throughout his career. The portrait serves as a reminder that heroism often goes unrecognized, and that the children of heroes carry forward their parents' courage in ways that shape entire communities. Patrick McKenna's split-second decision to risk his life saving neighbors created ripple effects that influenced firefighting practices and disaster response for decades. The photograph that had seemed to capture an impossible detail had actually preserved one of the most important truths about human nature: that love and admiration can transcend physical scars, and that a child's pride in their parents' heroism can light up their eyes with an intensity that cameras can capture for posterity. The reflection in James McKenna's eyes wasn't impossible at all. It was the natural result of a son looking at his father and seeing not damaged skin, but the face of a hero who had risked everything to save others. Sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries are simply love made visible through the lens of history.